Hello, I hope your Pesach preparations are going along well. I thought it would be nice to share something really beautiful for the Seder. One of the central mitzvahs that we have, the night of the Seder, is to eat maror. Take the maror, we dip it in charoses. There's a Medrash Haggadol, which teaches us what maror connotes. The Medrash says that if you look throughout Tanakh, you find 4 uses for the word maror. First, we have by Chana. When Chana came to be mispalel at the Mishkan, at the tabernacle, 19 years of childlessness, the pasuk says, "V'hi maras nafesh," and she was bitter. Says the Medrash Haggadol that the word mariros, maror, connotes childlessness. And we know that in Mitzrayim, for some time, our people were not having children. Amram, the Gadol Hador, the great man of the generation, separated from his wife. Everyone followed suit. They didn't want to bring children into such a world. The second place you have by the Isha Hashunamis, when she loses her child. And you remember she sends word to bring back Elisha, the one through whom she had been able to have a child. And he comes back and he rushes towards her and she comes out to him. And she's told to stop. And he says, Ki isha marola. She's a bitter woman. Let her be. So Mariros also connotes losing a child. In Mitzrayim, they lost children. In Mitzrayim, they had the children snatched away from them and thrown into the Nile. They had children stuffed into brick walls. There was losing children. There's another pasuk in Mishlei. Adam yodea moras nafsho. Person knows the bitterness of his own soul, which connotes brokenheartedness. And we know in Mitzrayim it was bad. We know at least the menfolk, they were depressed. They were brokenhearted. And fourthly, we have in the book of Eov that Eov is described as being mar, as being bitter. And this is in relationship to a sickness. He had various wounds on him. And we know that in Mitzrayim, with the malnutrition, the horrible slavery, sickness was rampant. As a matter of fact, there's a medrash that says majority of the Jewish people had limbs that were mangled and etc. So there was sickness. So maror represents 4 things which bring about bitterness. Number 1, childlessness. Number 2, losing children. Number 3, brokenheartedness. And number 4, sickness. We take that maror and we dip it in charoses. One of the major ingredients of charoses is the apple. We grate up an apple. Why? Well, there's a pasuk in Shir Hashirim says, Tachas hatapuach orartich. It celebrates the women who didn't give up hope. The women who wanted to continue, they wanted to have children. So they beautified themselves and they talked their children into living with them. And they mothered children. And they had to take them out to the fields because the Egyptian Gestapo was going to come looking for the children. Like we know what happened with Moshe Rabbeinu. They took him out to the fields. Those fields were apple orchards. And it was under the trees that they gave birth to the children. And they left the children there. And they were miraculously taken care of by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He fed them, he clothed them, he taught them. And months and years later, they came back to their homes, healthy, good children. And they spoke of the goodness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And they gave our fathers and mothers hope. If Isaac shared the great Slobodka Rosh Yeshiva, he pointed out something so beautiful. He said, what was wrong with these women? They were out of their minds having children. He pointed out that childbirth is so difficult for a woman. It breaks down a woman's body. After several children, there are real differences. It really takes a toll. And childbirth, the pain of childbirth, the Gemara says that a woman, when she's giving birth to a child, she swears that she will never live with her husband again. She will never have a child again. She swears that she'll do that. Such pain. This day and age, she doesn't swear that. She just screams for an epidural. And oy, 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 if the epidural's too late, if she asks for it too late, oh, is she upset. But normally, a woman's willing to go through all of that because they're going to have a beautiful child. A child that they could nurse, a child that they could feed, a child they could swaddle, a child they could put in their bugaboo stroller and go to the park and share stories with friends about the child. She looks forward to the day that she's going to take her child and take him on the her on the yellow school bus and wave goodbye. First day of school. There's so many beautiful things she had to look forward to. These women in Mitzrayim, what did they have to look forward to? Chances are, it's hard to say. Chances are they had to look for a dead child. A child that would be thrown into the Nile, and many, many were. A child that would be stuffed as a brick into a wall. What were they doing? Says Rav Sher, these women were so special. It's because of the righteous women that our fathers were redeemed from Egypt, because they had hope. And more than that, they believed, they knew what the Gemara tells us, that a child is conceived, immediately that child is a candidate for Olam Haba, even if it's never born. Even if, God forbid, the baby is taken by the Mitzrayim. They will live for eternity in Olam Haba. So the women had hope, and the women knew it was worth it. It wasn't about them. It was for Am Yisrael. And it was for the child's eternity. Beautiful story. I heard about 20 years ago by Israel Tauber, motivational speaker and businessman. I heard him talk shortly after he visited his mother. His mother was a survivor. He was a survivor. His mother, who had given birth to him just before the war, gave birth to children, became pregnant, and gave birth to children, and schlepped her children from DP camp to concentration camp. During those years, she had five more babies. She conceived 5 more babies. 4 of them survived. The 5th one didn't survive because she was in Auschwitz, and Mengele Yamach Shemo was performing experiments on her. That was a girl. The girl didn't survive because of that. But her 4 brothers did. And every place she went, people were astounded. How could you do this? You bring children into this hell? How can you do such a thing? You're a cruel individual. And as a little boy, Azriel would hear people say this to his mother. And he always wondered. And he said that just before he was delivering this speech, He was with his mother, and he said his mother's getting older. He needed to ask her the question. So he did. He said, Ma, nobody else was having children at that time. Why did you do it? And she looked back at him and she said, Azriel, you're a shaita. You're a fool. You don't think like a Jew. A Jew knows that a child is conceived, immediately goes to Olam Haba. It lives for eternity. That's the way the Jew thinks. That was the attitude of the Jewish women in Mitzrayim, and that has been the attitude of Jewish women, having hope and understanding what life is all about, eternity, throughout the ages. And hence we take that moror, that bitter moror, the childlessness, the losing children, the brokenheartedness, the sickness of the ages, and we dip it in the sweet apple. And we are revived with the belief and the trust, emunah and bitachon of the women and their values, understanding what life is all about, eternity. I hope and pray you have an absolutely wonderful, wonderful Pesach. You should have a wonderful Sederim, and we'll meet again, God willing, next week. All the best. Chag kosher v'sameach.